Welcome to Naked Spirituality, a video blog series of sacred attention therapy and the Center for Human Awakening. My name is Rob Meager. For more information about sacred attention therapy, the Center for Human Awakening, and our video blog series, please visit our website at www.centerforhumanawakening.com, and center is spelled C-E-N-T-E-R. These video blogs support one of the center's core activities, which is collaboration and partnership with individuals, communities, and healing centers practicing personal growth and spiritual development. Our guest today is Bill Ferraiolo, and we will be talking with Bill about his healing work. And now I will bring Bill on screen. Welcome, Bill. It's nice to be with you. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
I was looking forward to this interview. It's a breath of fresh air in many ways for me, because over the past few years, the majority of people that I speak with, the very broad term healer, so that could be everything from psychiatrist, psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, counselor, neurosurgeon, Reiki practitioner, yoga practitioner, so on and so forth. Often it's a product and a service that they have to offer and share with the world. And it's often that we speak about in these interviews, but you don't quite have a product or a service as such that you're offering as your gift to the world.
Well, I have a book.
And we'll certainly make sure to bring that in. But there's a philosophy of life that is a cornerstone of the work you do. And I wanted to use that as an entry point into our sharing. And your LinkedIn profile, in part, I'm not going to read the whole thing, just a little piece, describes you this way. William Ferraiolo, PhD, is a professional philosopher, a practicing Stoic, an author, and he has published numerous articles in a variety of professional and academic journals. And when I came across the term practicing Stoic, I'll be honest, I had to look it up because I had not heard it before. And I was most pleasantly surprised by what I found. But for those listening and watching, could you tell us what is a practicing Stoic? Or perhaps more importantly, what do you mean by a practicing Stoic?
Sure. One of the first hurdles you have to cross is the difference between uppercase S Stoic philosophy and lowercase s Stoicism, which refers to kind of keeping a stiff upper lip and a general kind of emotional, psychological attitude or inclination. When I say I'm practicing Stoic, I refer to a Greco-Roman school of philosophy developed during the Hellenistic period. The people that you'll read about most readily, if you want to read about the Greco-Roman Stoics, you're going to encounter Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations. You're going to encounter Epictetus. You're going to encounter Seneca. Musonius Rufus may come up, although we don't have that much of his work. Here's kind of an elevator speech on what Stoicism is. Stoicism was a school of philosophy that taught that eudaimonia is an ancient Greek word, often gets translated as happiness, but that's kind of a ham-handed translation. Eudaimonia really means flourishing, living well, and doing well. Stoicism teaches that to live well, to flourish, to attain eudaimonia, is to develop the four cardinal virtues, and then there are, of course, secondary and tertiary virtues. Essentially, one should seek to be wise, just, courageous, and temperate or self-disciplined. According to Stoicism, these characteristics, these virtues, and the attainment thereof are within our own power, directly within the power of our will. We can will ourselves to behave in certain ways, to reason in certain ways, to follow out certain types of thought patterns, to resist unhealthy or unwise impulses. Those are what Stoics refer to as internals, meaning internal to the will or to the sphere of control of one's own will. Everything else is referred to as an external. Externals are not within our control. The external world, other persons, even one's own body is not within one's control. And if it were, I always tell people I wouldn't look like this, would I? I mean, no one would choose this voluntarily. We age whether we like it or not. We're all going to die whether we like it or not. Spoiler alert, you die at the end, you know. We get sick whether we like it or not. And of course, our bodies can fail us at any moment. If I experience an aneurysm within the next few seconds, this will be a brief interview. But our will, our faculty of deliberation and choice, that is, according to Stoicism, always within our control as long as we are alive and conscious and presumably within our right minds and so on.
I may come back to an possible relationship between those internal characteristics or traits and its influence on the external. But I wanted to ask, Bill, when I did a little bit of research on the branches of philosophy, I was surprised at just how many there were.
Oh, sure.
And what is it about Stoic philosophy or the school of Stoic philosophy that attracted you or that appealed to you to the degree that you've imbued it, you've imbibed it? It has become a way of life for you, as my understanding is with Stoic philosophers.
Right. Well, in principle, it has become a way of life for me. I should point out to you and to your viewers that I fail to behave in virtuous fashion on a regular basis from multiple times per day. I'm nothing remotely close to resembling a Stoic sage. We don't know if there ever really were any Stoic sages. Probably the closest you get to the ideal of the sage is someone like Socrates or Diogenes, a Cynic philosopher. Stoicism descended from ancient Cynicism, Epictetus, people of that nature. I'm not in their league, not even close. But I can tell you the kind of Reader's Digest abridged version of the story of how I ended up here.
Please.
On my 18th birthday, when I was in high school, I was a jock. I was a football player. I was a wrestler. I did some boxing. On my 18th birthday, I destroyed my left knee at the last day of wrestling practice for my life. In the last 5 minutes, I was wrestling with the assistant coach, and I just shredded my my ACL, my MCL, my meniscus. My athletic career was over. And I had a scholarship to go to college. I had an Army ROTC scholarship, Reserve Officer Training Corps, military scholarship. Well, that was gone. They didn't want me anymore after that. So I had always sort of relied on my body for most of those endeavors that interested me. Well, my body didn't work anymore, so I had to see if this worked at all. And as it turns out, sometimes. I ended up having to find a new major. I was taking some philosophy courses, and I was at Rutgers at the time. And I asked one of my philosophy professors, because I'd really fallen in love with the study of philosophy. I asked one of my professors, is it possible that I could make a living doing philosophy? And he said, no. So I didn't know what else to do. So, someone shoves a degree in your face. Applied to graduate school poorly. I didn't realize that applying for graduate school was quite different from applying for undergraduate. I ended up at the University of Oklahoma, which turned out to be a very good program. In my estimation, kind of an underrated program. So I'm there for 6 years. Someone hands me a PhD, says go look for a job. I had no idea how to do that. I just applied everywhere. And I ended up at San Joaquin Delta College in Stockton, California. And lived there for 18 years until I got married to my wonderful, beautiful wife, Jennifer. And she lives up the road in Lodi, from the old Creedence Clearwater Revival song. Oh, Lord, stuck in Lodi. Yeah, Lodi. And during all that time, that whole story, I studied almost no Stoicism whatsoever. My area of specialization was metaphysics. My dissertation had nothing to do with Stoicism. I realized in my early to mid 30s that I had inherited a fairly severe anxiety and depression disorder from my father. Both of my brothers, I think, also arguably inherited it. And one of them, my brother Vinny, actually committed suicide a few years ago. We suspect in large part due to difficulties stemming from this condition. So I was often very angry, still a bit of a bad temper, but not nearly as bad as it used to be. I had a very hard time sleeping, very hard time turning my mind off. I was frequently involved in conflicts, some merely verbal, some not. Some things that, well, I would have been better off without. And I stumbled upon the Discourses of Epictetus. And I picked it up, I began to read it, and I wasn't more than 15 or 20 pages in when the proverbial light goes on. It resonated so clearly, so deeply with me that I knew that if there was any hope for me, and we're still working on finding out, if there was any hope for me, it was to be found, at least in part, in the work of Stoic philosophy and understanding Stoic philosophy, and in trying to enact a Stoic life as best I can, as best as I'm able. And I very, very flawed. I'm better off than I used to be. That's the only claim I will make.
I'm struck in the sharing of that story, what you began sharing at the beginning about your athletics career, right, and how there was that seminal moment, that gate, whereby the essence of the Stoic philosophies, as we've shared, came front and center for you, and that is the internal teachings, the internal four pillars of wisdom, justice, courageousness, and self-discipline, versus that's external and that we can't control, and how that ushered you in to what was the beginning of a long journey with philosophy that's ultimately led you here to the Stoic tradition.
Right. In retrospect, I realized that was a really watershed moment when my knee collapsed. I'd been injured a number of times. I had broken bones and so on, but this is the kind of injury from which one does not fully recover. Especially, I had the surgery in 1987. It wasn't nearly as effective as today. And in retrospect, I realized that I was compelled by that event to, I don't want to say reinvent myself. That sounds pretentious. I was compelled to reconsider the possibilities, reconsider possible futures. I would never have guessed when I was in high school that I would become a professor. I would never have contemplated philosophy as even a potential career path. So in retrospect, it's odd, but I'm grateful for that horrific and incredibly painful injury. Had that not occurred to me, I would not have studied philosophy, would not have learned about Stoicism, and who knows, I would probably be a wreck somewhere right now, even more than I am.
Some of the underlying tenets that I understand, and please enlighten me if need be, but my understanding of just some of the underpinnings, the teachings of the Stoic school of philosophy include emotions result in errors in judgment, which can be destructive, this being one. So that call towards managing one's emotions.
Some emotions in particular, the Stoics probably would have said passions. There are healthy emotions, there are reasonable emotions. Some people do have the impression that Stoicism advocates emotionlessness, kind of like the character Spock from Star Trek.
Right.
That's a bit of a misconception. William Irvine actually has a very interesting book, one of the best introductions to Stoicism you can find, so I recommend to your viewers. And the subtitle is On the Ancient Art of Stoic Joy. There is a joy to be had in self-discipline, in developing virtuous states of character. So while it is correct that allowing the emotions to drive us, to lead us, acting impulsively without reasoning is often very destructive, I don't want to give your viewers the impression that all emotions are destructive or that you're better off not experiencing any emotions. I don't believe I would want that.
Some other underpinnings I understand are ethics as a main focus of human knowledge and the development of self-control or fortitude.
Right.
Now, what strikes me if you bring all of that together is how similar it feels to me to be spiritual practice, to be present in other spiritual traditions, teachings, and practice.
Oh, yes.
Is this how you see Stoic philosophy, as a spiritual practice?
Yes. I sometimes tell people, and again, this is an oversimplification, but that doesn't make it incorrect. I often tell them that Stoicism, you might think of Stoicism as the Western version of Buddhism. In terms of practical counsel, the sorts of mental discipline that both advocate, the governance of one's behavior, of one's speech that they both advocate, is strikingly similar. They're very, very, very much the same. Where you get a divergence between Stoicism and Buddhism tends to be in terms of the metaphysics, the underlying conception of the nature of reality, which is, I would make the case, not crucial when it comes to understanding and applying the practical counsel. So if a good Buddhist, I suspect, would probably make a pretty good Stoic, and vice versa.
Now, you're showing a great deal of intuition in where I thought I might go and flow with some of my inquiry. And I wanted to ask, in the Stoic tradition, what is knowledge?
Well, that's complicated. Knowledge is primarily regarded as a rational attainment, right? The condition of knowing something, or at least having a high degree of confidence. There are epistemological debates about whether knowledge in the sense of absolute certainty is ever attainable. But Stoicism is very much a rationalist discipline, in the sense that we depend upon our reason crucially for the attainment of understanding of the human condition, of the nature of surrounding reality, understanding what is and what is not within our control. I would not associate a kind of intuitionism with Stoicism, at least not as a central component of it. So knowledge is a matter of the right use of reason, the development of arete, or excellence, within the sphere of the application of one's cognitive abilities. Is one way to put it. I don't know if I quite answered your question.
You did. Okay. Now, what about truth?
Well, again,
what do the Stoic philosophy say about truth? What is truth?
I don't know that you had explicit theories of truth being presented within Stoicism. I suspect, and I suppose I could be wrong with this, but I suspect most of them would probably fall under the heading of what we call the correspondence theory of truth today. To make a true statement, or to have a true belief, is for that statement or belief to correspond to facts, that is, conditions of reality, states of affairs in the external world, predominantly in the external world. One can have beliefs about oneself, of course. But I suspect most Stoics would not be terribly troubled by the basic correspondence theory of truth, the fundamental claim that truth is a matter of correspondence to fact.
Okay.
Now, of course, there are different truths pertaining to different realms. There are truths about oneself. There are truths about the external world. There are obviously truths about what's going on in my mind, introspectively speaking, are going to ineliminably involve certain cognitive states. But for the most part, when we make statements about the nature of the external world, we either get it right or we get it wrong. And this, the correspondence theory of truth, I would make the case goes back at least as far as Aristotle. He offers a kind of a cryptic, you know, cryptic description of the theory. And I suspect that most of the Stoics probably would have been in that camp. Probably would have thought Aristotle was onto something there. Aristotle himself was not a Stoic. The Stoic school developed after Aristotle.
I'd like to talk a little bit about your most recent book, which is your second book. I understand it was published in October of 2017.
That's correct.
Likely written and it's
it is.
Keep it up there. Keep it up there. That's good. The title of it, Meditations on Self-Discipline and Failure, Stoic Exercise for Mental Fitness.
Right. You got Marcus Aurelius's bust right there.
There we go.
The actual philosopher.
There's a likeness to you, Bill. There's a likeness to you.
Hey, if that sells a copy, I'll.
Okay. Tell us about the book. Tell us about the book.
Oh, okay. I had just finished going through the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and it occurred to me, two things occurred to me. I realized, first of all, this is an excellent exercise he was putting himself through. He was forcing himself to reason carefully and honestly about his behavior, about his thought patterns, about where he had failed, about where he needed to improve, about the nature of the human condition and his relationship to other persons, the external world, etc. I thought this is a really excellent exercise. I should do this. So I started doing it. I started writing down my own meditations. I'd write down a number of meditations per day, and I would edit them and so on. And I realized fairly early on that my journal was largely a journal of failure. I was largely noting how I had failed, how I had behaved less than virtuously, less than rationally. And it occurred to me that most of my failures were probably fairly common, probably kinds of difficulties into which people run fairly ubiquitously. Problems stemming from maybe having a bad temper, or maybe acting impulsively, or allowing oneself to be driven by one's emotions rather than one's reason, and so on. So it occurred to me that I might be able to do for contemporary people something like what Marcus Aurelius had done. Not that I'm comparing myself to him, apart from the beard maybe. But when Marcus wrote his Meditations, it wasn't for public consumption. The original title was something like To Himself. It was just a bedside journal. But subsequently, or posthumously after his death, subsequent to his death, they were published, and of course, for about 2,000 years now, they've done a lot of good, in my estimation. Certainly helped me out. So I thought I would try and do a contemporary version. Obviously not from his perspective, but just from my perspective. I am not a philosopher king. I'm not the most powerful man in the world, as he was at the time. In fact, I'm nobody. No one has ever heard of me. No one knows who I am, apart from my students and people who've met me. But I'm not a big name. I'm not a somebody. And even within the field of philosophy, very few people pay much attention to my work. And I thought, hey, that's much more common to the human condition than being an emperor. Most people are nobody special. Most people are, the everyman, the every woman out there. And hey, that's kind of me. So I have the advantage of not being particularly bright or special. So I'm just going to write as a regular person, and hopefully it will do someone some good.
Now, how do the meditation practices in the Stoic tradition, in your book, how are they similar and how are they different from other spiritual and faith traditions, meditation practice, like, for example, Buddhism or Hinduism?
Well, yeah, if you look at Buddhist or Hindu meditation, it typically involves certain postures and control of the breath, and it's mostly internal. It's mostly internal to one's own consciousness. Whereas in the Western tradition, and in Stoicism, meditations tend to be written meditations. And so you see this in things like the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, obviously. You also see this in something like Augustine in his Confessions, Tolstoy in his Confessions. So the idea is to write out one's experiences, one's thoughts about one's experiences, and to try to use that as a device for improving oneself, for encouraging oneself to be more self-disciplined, more courageous, more just, to attain greater levels of wisdom through writing, thinking about what you've written, and trying to act in accordance with the advice that you're giving yourself in these meditations.
I'm gonna.
So we don't sit in the lotus posture or anything like that. I can't. I got a bad knee.
A little bit of my bias is going to come through, and it sounds a little bit like one is embarking or engaging in some self-psychotherapy.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. I do regard Stoic practice as a form of something like psychotherapy, and in fact, the current forms of psychotherapy that are most effective, at least according to the research I've seen, for dealing with problems like anxiety and depression and some other cognitive disorders, are cognitive behavioral therapy and rational emotive behavioral therapy, developed by Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis, respectively. And they were both big fans of Stoicism. In fact, Albert Ellis explicitly credits Stoicism as being sort of the taproot of rational emotive behavior therapy. So yeah, there's no question. Stoicism is, in my view, very useful as a form of therapy, of self-psychotherapy, if that's the way you'd like to put it. That's correct.
The subtitle, Mental Fitness. What's that about? What's that aspect that you bring forth in the book, this mental fitness?
Well, I think most people have an intuitive understanding of physical fitness, and I've always been very interested in physical fitness. I still work out a lot. You probably can't tell by looking at me. I'm almost 50 now, and so things start to I don't know go south. But I work out a lot, and it occurred to me that since people have an intuitive understanding of what it means to indulge in physical fitness or pursue physical fitness, that if I could convince readers and potential readers that there is such a thing as pursuing mental fitness, pursuing and trying to improve one's application of reason. You see, applied reason, applied rationality, applied cognitive discipline, it really is kind of analogous to applied methods of improving one's physique, one's muscles. You can do push-ups and sit-ups and lift weights and run and work on your cardio. You can also work on your cognitive skills and your mental discipline and your methods of self-rectification, of improving yourself.
Spiritual muscle might be another way of expressing it as well.
Sure. I wish you had told me that earlier. I might have worked it into the subject.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a selfish.
Spiritual muscles.
I'm going to ask you a selfish question.
Okay.
Having been ordained as an interfaith minister, I couldn't help but notice, again, on your LinkedIn profile, it talked about one of the courses you teach at San Joaquin Delta College, and that is the philosophy of religion.
Right. And you're asking me,
what does one explore in such curriculum?
Well, I actually have not taught that in a couple of years. We hired someone who now has taken over that course for the most part. But typically what you do is I would introduce students to various wisdom traditions. I would introduce them to Buddhism, to Hinduism. We did some Confucianism. And of course, there is, you got your theistic, monotheistic, Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. And you would show them arguments within those different traditions, objections against those arguments, and then I would hope that they would develop enough intellectual autonomy to reason on their own about which tradition, if any, is closest to being correct, giving good advice about what it is to live well, to be virtuous. I never tell my students what I believe about anything that I teach them. I never tell them, what my position is, because I want them reasoning about these matters on their own, just with some guidance about what it is to reason, what it is to critically evaluate an argument. So that's what we also did some Taoism in the course. So you take the major religious traditions, you explain them, you explain why certain principles and practices have developed, what the goals are, what the sort of overarching worldview is, and then you raise objections either from other religious traditions or objections from the rejection of religious traditions, right? How might an atheist or an agnostic raise an objection such as the theistic problem of evil against Judaism or Islam or Christianity, that kind of thing.
Bill, if someone wanted to reach out to you, they wanted to contact you directly, how could they do so? Is there an email address, a website you could direct them to?
Sure. The email address is W for William Ferraiolo, FERRAIOLO at deltacollege.edu. So anybody can email me there. I have an academia.edu webpage, and everything I've ever published is available there. You can click on links that will enable you to purchase the 2 books I've written. But all the articles that I've published, they're all free. You can just click on them and read anything I've written about Stoicism, about philosophy of religion, about metaphysics. You can read my dissertation if you want to. I don't know why anybody would want to. And of course, I've got a LinkedIn profile, got a ton of connections on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. So those are all good ways to contact me if anyone is interested.
Okay, as well as a YouTube channel.
I don't have my own channel. I have done a number of these interviews. Okay. You know what? I think I might actually have a YouTube channel that I sort of tried to set up, but then failed to follow through.
Might be in your future.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Might be in your future.
But well, see, this is a failure of self-discipline on my part. It's one of my main vices. But yeah, there are a bunch of, I think I've done 8 or 9 of these interviews now, and most of them are available on YouTube. So if anyone wants to see this one or another one, just go to YouTube and type in WILLIAM space FERRAIOLO, and you can listen to me talk about stoicism.
Well, hopefully you can add this one to the growing gift of your interviews.
Well, if people think it's a gift, that works for me. But I am also. I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence by pretending I'm not hawking this book. I do want to. And it's not entirely a matter of altruism. I do want to help people, but I'm not going to send the royalty money back.
Well, we'll make sure there's a link actually to, in addition to your contact information, we'll put up a link in the scrolling credits right to the book in case someone wanted to go there directly.
That would be great. It's available both in the paperback copy and also the ebook, which is significantly cheaper for people who want to save a couple bucks.
Good. Bill, thank you so much for joining me on this Sunday afternoon, and auspicious as it is with Super Bowl Sunday.
Right.
May your team, if there is one, do well.
Don't have one. I used to play football myself, but it's not my thing anymore. I watch the UFC now.
Yeah. Thanks again, Bill.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.